What if the one moment you were completely sure of yourself was the exact moment life decided to pull the rug right out from under you? You've planned everything, your flight, your hotel, your schedule, you've got your presentation polished, your confidence intact, and your armor fully on. And then a blizzard hits Denver. Every flight is grounded, every road is white, and the hotel, the one you booked 3 months in advance, has exactly one room left. And there's a stranger standing right next to you at that front desk. A stranger with tired eyes, a rolling suitcase, and a 7-year-old girl tugging at his sleeve, whispering, "Daddy, I'm hungry." Now, if you are a high-powered CEO who has never lost a negotiation in her life, what do? Do you pull rank? Do you flash the corporate card? Oh, do you say, with your most professional, unbothered smile, "We're mature adults. Surely we can figure this out"? Because that's exactly what Vivian Holt did, and she had absolutely no idea what that single dad was about to do next. Stay with me. Because this is the story of one room, one blizzard, one little girl who said the wrong thing at exactly the right time, and 2 people who walked into a hotel as strangers and walked out as something neither of them had a name for yet. Welcome to Crest Stories. Let's get into it. Vivian Holt did not do chaos. That's the first thing you needed to understand about her. She was 38 years old. The founder and CEO of Holt and Crane Partners, one of the most quietly powerful mid-size investment and consulting firms in the Pacific Northwest. And she had built every inch of that company on one principle: control. She controlled her calendar. She controlled her boardroom. She controlled the temperature in her office. Literally, there was a thermostat on her desk, and her assistant Todd had been warned, exactly once, never to touch it. She was not cruel. Let's be clear about that. She was not the kind of CEO who collected enemies or chewed through assistants like candy. She was fair. She was sharp. She was the kind of woman who could read a balance sheet the way other people read a novel, picking up on the tension, sensing the plot twist 3 pages before it happened. She had earned everything she had. And she had done it mostly alone, which was fine. She told herself it was fine. She was on Flight 2247, Seat 2A, aisle, Denver bound, the National Marketing and Investment Summit. 3 days, 12 keynote panels, 43 networking sessions, and a pitch she had been building for 6 weeks. A pitch that could expand her firm's reach into the Midwest. A move that would double their portfolio in under 2 years. This was the most important business trip she'd taken in 5 years. Everything was planned. Everything was in order. She had the hotel confirmation on her phone, the Aldridge, a boutique property about 6 blocks from the convention center. Room booked, itinerary locked. She'd even pre-ordered room service for the first night, so she wouldn't have to think about dinner. She pulled out her laptop, opened the presentation for the 14th time, and scrolled slowly through each slide. Perfect. She allowed herself one quiet moment of satisfaction, and then the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting some updated weather reports out of Denver. There's a significant winter storm that has moved in faster than originally projected. We're going to ask you all to sit tight while we get more information from ground control." Vivian stopped scrolling. She looked out the window. The sky, which had been a pale January blue an hour ago, was now the color of old pewter. She took a slow breath. "It's fine," she told herself. "Delays happen. We'll still land." They did not still land. 2 hours later, Flight 2247 was diverted back to Portland International Airport. The storm, which the Weather Service had politely called a significant weather event, was, according to the news app Vivian pulled up the moment she had signal, a full-scale Rocky Mountain blizzard. Denver's airport was closed. Interstate 70 was a parking lot. The city was buried under 22 inches of snow, with another 8 to 12 expected overnight. She sat in the terminal at Portland, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear, watching the departure board flip every gate listing to the same word. Canceled, canceled, canceled. She called Todd. "Find me an alternative route," she said, before he could even say hello. "Any connecting city, any airline. I need to be in Denver by tomorrow morning." "I've already been looking," Todd said. And she could hear the careful way he said it, the way someone delivers news they know the other person will not enjoy. "Every flight into Denver is grounded through tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. I've checked Chicago O'Hare, Dallas, Salt Lake. Nothing is getting in. The storm is affecting the whole corridor." She closed her eyes. "What about driving?" "Vivian, I know. The interstates are closed." "Todd, I know." A pause. "The summit organizers have been sending updates," he said gently. "They're extending the first day's sessions into tomorrow. If you can get in by tomorrow afternoon, you'll only miss the morning panel. Your pitch isn't until Thursday." She exhaled slowly. Okay. This was manageable. "Book me into a hotel here," she said, "something close to the airport. I'll catch the first available flight tomorrow." "Already on it," Todd said. And then, slightly less confidently, "There might be an issue with availability. Apparently a lot of passengers are doing the same thing right now." "Todd?" "Working on it, Vivian." She hung up and stared at the departure board for a long moment. 22 inches. She had once closed a $12 million deal from a hospital room after an emergency appendectomy. She could handle a little snow. 3 gates down, Grant Lawson was having what could only be described as a spectacularly complicated Tuesday. He was 36. He ran a boutique marketing strategy firm out of Seattle called Lawson Creative. 12 employees, a good reputation, a client list he was genuinely proud of. He'd built it from scratch after leaving a big agency 6 years ago, back when life still looked the way he'd planned it. Back when Claire was still alive. He didn't let himself think about that right now. He never did, not in public, not when he had work to do. He'd learned to fold the grief up carefully and store it somewhere deep, like a letter you'd read so many times you had it memorized, so you didn't need to take it out anymore. He had a job to do. That was enough. The job was the summit. More specifically, a pitch to a firm called Holt and Crane Partners. His friend and colleague Sebastian Pryor, Seb, who had the charm of a golden retriever and the networking instincts of a shark, had somehow gotten them a meeting slot with the firm's team. Not the CEO herself, they'd been told, but her senior director of strategy. Still, if the pitch landed, it would be the biggest partnership Lawson Creative had ever pursued. Grant had been working on the pitch deck for 3 weeks. He had it memorized. He was ready. And then his phone rang at 6:15 that morning, just as he was about to board. It was his mother. "Sweetheart," she said in that tone she reserved exclusively for bad news and casseroles. "I'm so sorry. I woke up this morning with a fever. I went to the urgent care. It's the flu. I'm not contagious anymore, but I feel absolutely terrible. And the doctor says I need to rest." Grant's stomach dropped. "Mom, what about Pippa?" "She's here. She's fine. She had breakfast. She's watching cartoons." "Mom." He pressed his fingers to his forehead. "I board in 30 minutes. I know. Is there anyone else? What about Seb?" Grant almost laughed. Seb was already in Denver. Seb was always somewhere before everyone else. He thought fast. His neighbor Donna was on vacation. His backup sitter had a family thing. His sister lived 4 hours away. His in-laws, Claire's parents, were in Florida. It was January. Everyone was somewhere. Everyone except Pippa. Pippa, who was 7 years old and currently watching cartoons at his mother's house in her pajamas, completely unaware that her father was about to have a very small breakdown at Portland International Airport. He had called his mother back 10 minutes later. "I'm bringing her with me. Grant, the storm, we'll land before it hits. It's fine. She'll love it. She's been asking to go on a trip." This was technically true, Pippa had been asking to go on a real plane trip with you, Daddy, since October. The fact that this particular trip involved a business summit and a blizzard and zero pre-planning for a child's attendance was a detail Grant chose not to dwell on. He called Seb. "You're bringing your kid to a conference," Seb said, not even as a question. "She'll be fine. She brings coloring books everywhere." Grant. Seb. A pause. "You're going to be fine," Seb said, in a tone that suggested he was not entirely sure about this. So Grant had rushed back to his mother's house, grabbed Pippa's purple rolling suitcase, her stuffed elephant, whose name was Herbert, and whose importance to Pippa's emotional stability could not be overstated, and driven back to the airport. Pippa, to her enormous credit, was thrilled. She was 7. She had a suitcase and a window seat and a juice box. This was, as far as she was concerned, the best day of her entire life. They were 20 minutes from landing in Denver when the captain announced the diversion. Pippa looked out the window at the clouds and said quite seriously, "Daddy, is that a snow monster?" Grant looked at the pewter-colored sky and thought about his pitch deck. "Yeah, baby," he said softly. Something like that. By the time Grant and Pippa made it to the Aldridge, it was nearly 10 o'clock at night. Todd, Vivian's assistant, had managed to secure her a reservation through what he later described as an act of God and 17 minutes of hold music. He had also, with great resourcefulness, booked the last confirmed room at the Aldridge under Holt and Crane Corporate. What Todd did not know, could not have known, was that there was a system error in the hotel's booking software that had caused a double confirmation on that same room. What this meant in simple terms was that 2 different people had a printed confirmation for room 412, and both of them were standing at the front desk at the same time. Grant arrived first, by 40 seconds. He had Pippa on one side of him, Herbert tucked under her arm, half asleep against his shoulder. He had his rolling bag on the other side and his confirmation email pulled up on his phone. The lobby was warm and beautiful. Dark wood paneling, soft amber lighting, a fireplace crackling in the far corner. Under any other circumstances, it would have been charming. The front desk clerk, a young man named Dale Hutchins, who looked like he had aged approximately 15 years in the past 4 hours, looked up with the specific expression of someone who had delivered bad news so many times tonight that he had gone slightly numb to it. "Checking in?" Dale asked. "Grant Lawson," Grant said, sliding his phone across the counter. "I have a confirmation for tonight," Dale typed. Dale frowned. Dale typed again. That was when Vivian Holt walked through the front door. She came in from the cold in a long charcoal coat, her dark hair swept back, a leather portfolio under one arm and her phone in the other hand. She walked the way people walk when they've been running on adrenaline and sheer will for the past 6 hours, with absolute precision, as if the universe owed her forward momentum. She took her place in line behind Grant without looking at him. Then Pippa turned around. Because Pippa turned around for everything. She was 7. The entire world was interesting to her. She looked at Vivian with large, curious eyes. "Hi," Pippa said. Vivian blinked. She glanced down. "Hello," she said, a little uncertainly, as if small children were a category of things she didn't have an established protocol for. Pippa nodded solemnly, as if this were sufficient, and turned back around. At the desk, Dale was doing something with his keyboard that was becoming increasingly concerning. "Mr. Lawson," he said carefully, "I'm seeing your confirmation here, and I do have you in our system, but there appears to be a complication." "What kind of complication?" Dale lowered his voice slightly. "We had a system issue this evening due to the storm surge of incoming guests. It looks like room 412 was double confirmed. Your booking and another party's booking are both showing for the same room." Grant stared at him. "And the room is still available?" "The room is still available, yes, but we only have the one room." "What about any other rooms?" Dale's expression, earnest, pained, deeply apologetic, said everything before his mouth did. We are completely at capacity, Mr. Lawson. Every other room was claimed by 9 o'clock tonight. With the storm, we had guests checking in from 3 different diverted flights. I'm so sorry. We're working to reach partner hotels, but availability in the area is extremely limited. Excuse me. The voice came from behind Grant, measured, clear. The kind of voice that was used to rooms going quiet when it spoke. He turned around. Vivian Holt stepped forward, holding her phone out, the confirmation email visible on the screen. I believe I may be the other party, she said to Dale. She glanced briefly at Grant, a professional, assessing look. Vivian Holt, Holt and Crane Partners, room 412. Dale blinked. Yes, Ms. Holt, Yes, I was just explaining the situation. I heard, she said. She looked at Grant again, more directly this time. He looked back at her. She was striking, not in a way that announced itself, but in the quiet, steady way of someone who had never needed to announce anything. Sharp eyes, a composed mouth, the kind of face that had probably learned to reveal very little. Were you here first? She asked him. Straight. No preamble. He appreciated that. And actually, most people in her position would have just bulldozed past the question. By about 30 seconds, he said. She nodded slowly. Okay, she turned to Dale. What are our options? Dale looked like a man who wished he had called in sick today. We have a rollaway cot we can bring up. The room has a king bed and a sofa. We can offer a 20% discount on both rates. We're adults, Vivian said, and the confidence with which she said it was almost remarkable. Surely we can figure out a temporary arrangement. We're not animals. She looked at Grant. I don't know your situation, but I promise you I'm a perfectly reasonable person, and I have absolutely no interest in making this more complicated than it needs to be. 1 room, 1 night, professional boundary, done. Grant opened his mouth, closed it, and then Pippa, who had been listening with enormous interest, looked up at Vivian and said, Are you sleeping in our room? The lobby went very quiet. Vivian looked down at Pippa, then up at Grant, then back down at Pippa. Is this your daughter? She asked Grant. Yes, he said, a long pause. You have a child. I do. With you. That's generally how it works. Vivian stared at him for a moment that was almost funny, if you weren't the one living inside it. She had not planned for this, in all her controlled, organized, meticulous preparation for the evening. She had not planned for a 7-year-old named Pippa, the little girl said, extending her hand with great ceremony. What's your name? Vivian, CEO, founder, decorated negotiator, stared at the small, outstretched hand for exactly 1 second, and then, slowly, she reached out and shook it. Vivian, she said. That's a very long name, Pippa said thoughtfully. Can I call you Viv? Sure, Vivian said, in a tone that suggested she had never been called Viv in her professional life and wasn't entirely sure how to feel about it. Grant covered his mouth with his hand. It was not, strictly speaking, funny. It was also a little bit funny. Here's what you need to understand. In that moment, Grant Lawson had options. He could have pushed for the room. He had arrived first. He had his confirmation. He had a 7-year-old who hadn't eaten dinner and was running on the last fumes of a juice box in sheer stubbornness. He could have said, Look, I appreciate the offer, but this doesn't work with a child in the room. He could have let Dale continue the negotiation and see which way it fell. Any of these would have been reasonable. Any of these would have been what most people do. Protect your position, hold your ground. But Grant Lawson did none of that. He did something that made Dale blink, made Vivian's breath catch, and made Pippa say, Daddy, what are you doing? He turned to Vivian Holt, this CEO he had never met before tonight, and said calmly, quietly, with absolute sincerity, Take the room. Vivian stared at him. Excuse me? Take it, he said again. You need it. You look like you've been traveling since this morning. You're clearly here on business, and I'm not about to fight a woman over a hotel room in front of my kid." He paused. "Besides, she's watching." He nodded slightly toward Pippa, who was in fact watching with enormous eyes. Vivian opened her mouth, closed it. "No," she said, almost flustered, and Vivian Holt did not fluster. "You were here first. That matters." "It matters less than getting her settled," he said simply. "I'll figure something out. Dale," he looked at the clerk, "is there anything? A conference room? A lounge? Anything?" Dale hesitated. "We do have a small private events room that isn't being used tonight. It doesn't have a bed, but there's a couch, and it's warm. I can bring you blankets and pillows. It's not ideal." "We'll take it," Grant said. "Daddy," Pippa said in a loud whisper, "the couch isn't a bed." "I know, Pip. Herbert doesn't like couches. Herbert will survive." He reached down and ruffled her hair gently. She leaned into his hand like a sunflower toward light, that easy automatic trust that children have for the people they know will always catch them. And Vivian watched this, without meaning to, without being prepared for what it did to something behind her sternum. "Stop," she said. Grant looked at her. "Stop being noble," she said, and there was something in her voice now, something that hadn't been there before, something that sounded very faintly like a crack in a wall. "I'm not taking your room and sending you and your daughter to sleep on a couch. That's ridiculous." She turned to Dale. "What's the rollaway situation?" "We have 2 rollaway cots available. Bring both," she said. "One for him, one for the child." She looked at Grant. "The king bed in that room is probably large enough to stage an opera. There are 2 of us, 3 of us, and we are adults." She paused. "Mostly," she glanced at Pippa. "No offense." "None taken," Pippa said serenely. I'll take one side of the room. You and your daughter take the other. We put the rollaways up. We draw an invisible line down the middle. And in the morning, we never have to think about this again." She looked at him steadily. "Deal?" Grant studied her for a long moment. He was trying to figure out if this was generosity, or if she just couldn't stand the idea of someone else sacrificing more than she did. He suspected, looking at her, that it might be both. "Deal," he said. And that, right there, was the moment neither of them would ever fully be able to explain later. Something shifted, some small invisible thing, like the first domino touching the second. So gentle you almost didn't notice it. Almost. Room 412 was, as Vivian had correctly predicted, large. It was a corner suite, as it turned out. Tall windows on 2 sides looked out over a Denver skyline that was currently invisible beneath a curtain of white. The storm had settled in with the kind of quiet ferocity that only blizzards manage, making the world outside the window look like someone had pressed pause on everything. The room had a king bed on the far wall, a deep-cushioned sofa near the windows, a small writing desk, and a bathroom that Pippa immediately declared fancy because it had 2 sinks. The rollaways arrived within 20 minutes. Grant set one up near the sofa, angled slightly away from the bed. He made Pippa's rollaway cozy with every extra blanket Dale had provided, plus the one from the closet, plus her jacket folded as a supplementary pillow. He tucked Herbert under her arm. He found the room service menu. "Chicken tenders?" he asked her. "No, obviously," she said. He ordered. He also ordered soup for himself. He paused, looked across the room at Vivian, who was at the desk with her laptop open and her phone in hand, and asked, "Do you want anything?" She looked up, slightly startled. "I already ordered room service," she said. "Before the diversion. I don't know if they'll still—" "They probably won't," he said. "It's almost 10:30. The kitchen closes at 11. What do you want?" There was a pause that lasted a beat too long for a simple question. "The French onion soup," she said finally. "If that's not 2 French onion soups," he said into the phone. Vivian looked back at her screen. She felt something she couldn't immediately classify. It wasn't that the gesture was large. It wasn't. It was a soup order. A practical decision made by a practical person in a practical situation. But here was the thing about Vivian Holt's life, if you looked at it honestly. No one in her professional world ordered her soup. No one in her professional world noticed when she hadn't eaten, or asked without making it a thing, or just did it quietly, without waiting for a thank you or a transaction. They weren't friends. They weren't colleagues. They were two strangers sharing a hotel room in a blizzard, and he had just, without fanfare, without expectation, included her. She didn't know what to do with that, so she did what Vivian Holt always did when she didn't know what to do with something. She worked. Pippa ate her chicken tenders with great commitment. She had set Herbert up in a seated position at the end of her rollaway and was providing him with a running commentary on everything she observed in the room. The curtains, very purple, Herbert. The TV, it's really big. And the woman at the desk, she types very fast. Grant watched his daughter with the quiet, tired love of a man who had been a single parent for 3 years and had learned to find his peace in the small constants. Pippa eating, Pippa narrating. Pippa being exactly, entirely herself. She talks to the elephant a lot, Vivian said from across the room, not unkindly, curiously. He's a good listener, Grant said. How old is she? 7, he paused. She's been traveling since this morning. She's handling it better than most adults I know. Vivian glanced at Pippa, who was now showing Herbert the view from the window, even though the view was just snow. Does she travel with you often? Never, Grant said. This was a last-minute arrangement. He didn't elaborate. She didn't push. A companionable sort of silence settled between them, the kind that forms between people who have tacitly agreed not to interrogate each other. The soup arrived. They ate on opposite sides of the room. Vivian at her desk, Grant on the edge of his rollaway, Pippa cross-legged next to him now, describing Herbert's opinion of the soup's smell. At some point, Grant couldn't have said exactly when, Pippa fell asleep mid-sentence. One moment she was telling Herbert that the snowstorm was very dramatic, and the next she was sideways on the rollaway, mouth slightly open, but completely surrendered to unconsciousness the way only children can manage. Grant watched her for a second, then gently lifted her feet onto the bed and pulled the blanket up. He stood there for a moment, looking down at her, and it was such a specific thing, that moment. The quiet, the snow against the window, his daughter sleeping, that he forgot just briefly that he wasn't alone in the room. She looks just like you, Vivian said softly. He turned around. She was watching from across the room. Her laptop was closed now. Her professional armor, without her seeming to notice it, had softened around the edges. People say that, he said. He came and sat on the sofa, keeping his voice low. She has her mother's eyes, though. That shade of green, I don't know where it comes from in my family. A pause. For her mother, he looked at the window for a moment. Claire, he said. She passed 3 years ago, ovarian cancer. The silence that followed was the particular kind that descends when someone says something true and irreversible. Not uncomfortable, just honest. I'm sorry, Vivian said, and she meant it, not in the reflexive way people say it, but in the way you mean something when you haven't prepared to say it. Thank you, he said, simple, like he'd accepted this particular condolence so many times that he'd learned how to hold it without flinching. She's okay. Pippa, kids are, he exhaled slowly. Resilient is the word people use. I think they're actually just brave. They just get up and keep going because they don't know any other option. He looked over at his sleeping daughter. She gets up every single day with so much joy, he said quietly. I used to think I was protecting her. Turns out she's been protecting me. Vivian said nothing. She was looking at him the way she looked at something she hadn't expected to find, with very still, careful attention. What about you? He asked after a moment. What takes you to Denver? She blinked, shifted gears. He watched it happen, the way she recalibrated back to professional footing. "Summit," she said. "Pitch meeting. I have a partnership I'm trying to close." "Same," he said with a dry half-smile. "I'm in marketing strategy. My firm has a meeting with a company called Holt & Crane Partners." Something passed across Vivian's face. Something quick. Something she locked down immediately. "Is that right?" she said, carefully. Their senior director of strategy," Grant said. "Thursday morning. It's a big deal for us." "I'm sure you'll do well," she said. And it came out strange, too measured, too controlled. He looked at her for a second. "You okay?" "Fine," she said, in the brisk, clipped way of someone who is, in fact, not entirely fine. "Long day." He nodded. "Let it go." The storm pressed against the windows. The fire emoji on the thermostat glowed steadily at 72 degrees, and the night, very slowly, deepened. Vivian couldn't sleep. This was not unusual. She hadn't slept a full 8 hours since she was probably 24. There was always something, a number that didn't add up, a risk she hadn't fully modeled, a decision she needed to replay frame by frame until she was sure she hadn't missed anything. Tonight, the thing she was replaying was the conversation she just had. "He's pitching to my company." She'd put it together the moment he said it. Lawson Creative, she knew the name. Her senior director, Paula, had mentioned them in a briefing last month. Small firm, Pacific Northwest, impressive client retention metrics, creative approach. Paula had been excited about the meeting. Vivian had flagged it in her mind and moved on. She hadn't thought about it again. Until now. Because here's the thing that Vivian had not told Grant Lawson tonight. The thing she had locked away behind her professional composure and her careful pause and her "I'm sure you'll do well." The Holt and Crane board had been in discussions for 2 months about a strategic restructuring. And part of that restructuring, the part that had kept Vivian up more than any other, was a potential consolidation of their external vendor partnerships, which meant smaller firms, firms like Lawson Creative, with their strong work and their independent structure. Firms that Vivian's board was quietly recommending they fold in-house rather than continue paying outside. Which, in plain language, meant Lawson Creative was on the list of partnerships that might not exist at Holt and Crane after the next quarter. She hadn't made the decision. She wasn't even supposed to know it was on the table for Thursday's internal session, except that she was the CEO, and she knew everything that was on every table. She lay in the dark, listening to the muffled sound of the blizzard outside, and stared at the ceiling. Across the room, she could hear Grant's quiet, even breathing, and Pippa's softer one. 2 people sleeping with the uncomplicated piece of people who, whatever came tomorrow, had each other to come home to. And Vivian, who had never lost sleep over a business decision in her life, found herself, for the first time in a long time, genuinely unsettled. Not because of the money, not because of the deal, because of the soup, and the rollaway, and take the room, and the way he'd stood over his sleeping daughter like a lighthouse. She pressed her fingers against her eyes. "You can't," she told herself. "You don't know this man. You met him 4 hours ago. Business is business. Business is business." She said it again, firmly, in the part of her brain that made decisions. It listened. But something else, something quieter, something older, asked a different question. "What kind of person does this make you?" She didn't answer it. She turned over, closed her eyes, and somewhere around 2:30 in the morning, she finally, fitfully, fell asleep. What woke her at 3:15 was not the storm. It was a small voice saying, very carefully, "Herbert, I think I need to get a glass of water, but I don't want to wake Daddy." Vivian opened one eye. Pippa was standing in the middle of the room in her pajamas, holding Herbert under one arm and looking at the bathroom with the expression of someone doing advanced tactical calculations. The cups are on the bathroom counter, Vivian said quietly. On the left side. Pippa, startled, looked over at Vivian. Oh, she whispered, you're awake. Apparently. Pippa looked at the bathroom, then at Vivian, and then back at the bathroom. Are you scared of the dark? Vivian asked very gently. No, Pippa said immediately, and then, in a smaller voice, maybe a little bit. The storm is loud. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she got up, crossed the room in her socked feet, and turned on the bathroom light, low, just enough to cast a warm wedge of gold across the floor. Better. Better, Pippa agreed. Vivian poured her a glass of water. Pippa drank it with two hands, solemn and grateful, the way children drink water at 3 a.m. Your daddy is sleeping, Vivian observed. He works really hard, Pippa said in the tone of someone reporting an important fact. He was up late on his computer. He always does that. Does he? He's making something for a big meeting. Pippa nodded. He says it's going to help us, like, for the business. If it goes good, we can maybe get a bigger apartment, and I can have my own bathroom. She considered this. Not that I need one, but it would be nice. Vivian was very still. He told you that? He tells me most stuff, Pippa said. He says I'm his partner. She seemed very pleased about this. He said the meeting is with a very important company and they might want to work with him. She looked at Vivian with those enormous green eyes. Do you think it'll go good? Vivian looked at this child, this 7-year-old with her stuffed elephant and her quiet courage and her completely innocent, entirely devastating question. I think, Vivian said slowly, that your daddy is probably very good at what he does. Pippa nodded, satisfied. He is. He made the school fundraiser poster and everyone said it was the best one. High praise. That's what I said. Vivian almost smiled. Go back to sleep, Pippa. Okay. Pippa shuffled back toward her rollaway, then paused. Viv? Yes? Thank you for letting us share your room. Herbert says you're nice. Vivian stood in the bathroom doorway in the quiet dark and watched a 7-year-old settle herself under 3 blankets with a stuffed elephant. Herbert has good judgment, she said softly. And she stood there for a moment longer than she needed to, looking at nothing in particular, feeling something she hadn't felt in a very long time, something that felt a lot like perspective. Grant woke at 6:15. Old habit. He'd been a 6:15 person since Pippa started kindergarten, and someone had to be responsible for the lunches. The storm had slowed overnight, and the Denver sky beyond the window was the pale, exhausted gray of a city that had taken a beating and was just now beginning to breathe again. He could see the tops of buildings, snow piled thick on every surface. He dressed quietly, checked on Pippa, still asleep, one arm around Herbert, and opened his laptop. The pitch deck looked back at him. He'd reworked 3 slides last night, tightening the case studies, sharpening the ROI projections. It was as good as he could make it. He knew that. He also knew, with the particular clarity that comes at 6 in the morning after not enough sleep, that this meeting mattered more than almost anything he'd worked on in the past 2 years. Not just for the firm, for Pippa, for the apartment, for stability. For the future, he was still, 3 years after Claire, trying to piece together from scratch. He was reviewing his notes when he heard movement from across the room. He looked up. Vivian was already awake, which surprised him. She was sitting at the desk in the early morning quiet, dressed, coffee in hand, looking out at the snow. Not at her laptop, not at her phone, just out the window. He'd never seen her not doing something. In the 4 hours they'd been awake together last night, she had been in perpetual motion, typing, calling, checking, planning. Now she was just sitting. Something was different. Morning, he said carefully. She turned. Morning. How'd you sleep? Adequately, she said. And then, slightly more honestly, your daughter woke me up for water at 3 a.m. He immediately winced. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said quickly. She was fine. We had a conversation. She paused. She told me about the meeting. Grant stilled. What meeting? The Holt and Crane meeting. She looked at him steadily. Thursday. The pitch. He exhaled slowly. She mentioned it. She mentioned the apartment too, Vivian said, and the poster you made for the school fundraiser. A small silence. She's thorough, Grant said. She is. He looked at her. There was something in her face, something careful, something that hadn't been there last night, a kind of reckoning. Vivian, he said her name slowly. Is there something you want to tell me? She didn't answer immediately. She turned the coffee cup slowly between her palms, and then she said it. I'm not just a partner at the firm, she said. I'm the CEO. Holt and Crane, that's my company. The room went very quiet. Grant looked at her for a long moment. You're Holt, he said. I'm Holt. As in Holt and Crane. Parker Crane was my first business partner. He retired 4 years ago. Grant sat back. He processed this. He processed it with the particular, methodical calm of a man who had trained himself not to react immediately to things, a skill you develop when you're a single parent, because your reactions set the temperature for everyone else in the room. So the meeting on Thursday, he said, is with my company. Yes. And you've known this since. Since last night when you mentioned the firm name. She held his gaze. I should have said something immediately. I didn't. And I want to be honest with you about that. Why didn't you? The question sat between them. I'm plain and direct. She exhaled slowly. Because I wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. And Vivian Holt not knowing the right thing to do is, she almost smiled, not a position I'm comfortable with. He was quiet for a moment. Is there a conflict of interest? He asked. For the meeting? Potentially, she said. There's a board discussion happening Thursday afternoon, separate from your pitch, internal restructuring. Some of it touches on external partnerships. Grant looked at her carefully. Translation, there's a chance my firm gets cut loose before the meeting even has a chance to matter. She didn't deny it. She didn't dress it up. It's not my decision alone, she said. The board has their recommendations. I have final say. And where do you land? She looked out the window for a moment. I didn't know you 24 hours ago, she said. I still don't, not really. But I've been sitting here since 5:30 this morning asking myself a question I don't usually ask. What question? She looked at him. Whether the numbers I've been using to make this decision, she said slowly, are the only numbers that matter. Grant held her gaze. Vivian, don't, she said quickly. Don't tell me the pitch will speak for itself, or that you understand it's just business, or any of the things people say when they're trying to make it easier for someone else to make a hard choice. She shook her head. I'm not telling you this to get sympathy or to make you feel better. I'm telling you because I spent the night sharing a room with a man who gave up the only bed available for my sake and ordered my soup and let his kid fall asleep telling an elephant about the snowstorm, and I think you deserved the honesty before you walked into that building. A very long pause. Pippa stirred in her rollaway, turned over, didn't wake. Grant looked at his daughter, then back at Vivian. Thank you, he said quietly. I haven't done anything yet. You told me the truth, he said. Before you had to. That's something. She looked down at her coffee, and for one unguarded moment, just one, Vivian Holt looked like a person who was tired of carrying everything alone. It only lasted a second. But Grant saw it. Denver dug itself out by noon. Flights resumed. Roads cleared. The convention center opened its doors to a summit that had lost half a day, but none of its urgency. Grant got Pippa settled with Seb, who showed up at the hotel with breakfast sandwiches and exactly 0 questions, because Seb understood that some situations required sandwiches, not commentary. You doing okay? Seb asked, once Pippa was distracted by the hotel lobby's Christmas lights that were still somehow up in January. Ask me after Thursday, Grant said. Seb studied him. Something happened? A lot of things happened, Grant said. Long night. He didn't say more. Seb didn't push. That afternoon, Grant attended 2 summit panels, networked with 3 potential clients, and ate a very mediocre convention center sandwich. He did not see Vivian. He looked for her, not obsessively, not romantically. He did, but with the particular awareness of someone who has shared a room and a truth with a person and finds that their presence or absence registers in a new way. He spotted her once, across a crowded networking session, speaking to a group of 4 executives. She was in her element, authoritative, articulate, the kind of presence that made rooms reorganize slightly around it. Her armor was back on, polished and complete. She didn't see him, or if she did, she gave nothing away. He went back to his room that night and worked on the pitch until midnight. Thursday morning, 9:47 a.m. Grant Lawson stood outside Conference Room C at the Aldridge Convention Annex, pitch deck printed, laptop charged, notes reviewed. Seb was beside him. Pippa was with the hotel babysitting service, a contingency Seb had arranged because Seb was, it turned out, quietly excellent in a crisis. Okay, Seb said. You've done this 100 times. This is just bigger. This is different, Grant said. Different how? The CEO is in there. Seb blinked. I thought we were meeting with the strategy director. So did I. Seb stared at him. Grant, what happened in that hotel room? A lot of things, Grant said, for the second time in 2 days. He pushed open the door. The room had 4 people in it. Paula Raines, director of strategy, whom he recognized from LinkedIn. 2 other Holt and Crane executives he didn't know by face, and at the head of the table, laptop open, coffee at her right hand, Vivian Holt. She looked up when he entered. Their eyes met. She gave him nothing, no acknowledgement of what had passed between them. No flicker of the conversation from that morning in the snow-quiet room. She was the CEO. He was the pitch. This was business. He understood. He set up his laptop. He introduced himself and Seb. He felt the room assess him, politely, professionally, with the particular calibration of people who sit through 40 of these meetings a year and know within the first 2 minutes which ones will be worth their time. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lawson, Paula said. He clicked to slide one, and then he spoke. Grant Lawson was, as it turned out, very good at what he did. This was not a surprise to Seb, who had seen it before. It might have been a surprise to Paula's 2 colleagues, who had probably expected something serviceable. It was not, interestingly, a surprise to Vivian Holt. When she sat at the head of the table with her face in its professional configuration, attentive, measured, giving nothing, and she watched him work. He didn't over-explain. He didn't hedge. He presented data with the confidence of someone who'd lived inside it long enough to know exactly what it was doing and why it mattered. He told a story, an actual story, with a beginning and a conflict and a resolution about how marketing strategy could shift the way Holt and Crane was perceived in the Midwest market. He used specific examples. He showed the failure points of the existing approach and the precise levers his firm would use to address them. He was compelling. He was, Vivian realized, watching him with something she could only call honesty. Exactly what her firm needed, not because of the numbers. Numbers could come from anywhere. But because of the way he thought, the way he saw the shape of things, the way he didn't try to tell her what she wanted to hear. He told her what the data actually said and then told her what to do with it. Paula was leaning forward 15 minutes in. The 2 other executives were exchanging quiet nods. Grant reached the final slide. Lawson Creative isn't the biggest firm you'll talk to this week, he said. We're not the one with the flashiest offices or the most name recognition. But we're the one that will know your brand the way you know it, from the inside out. And we don't walk away when it gets complicated. He clicked off the presentation. Questions? He said. Paula had several. Vivian had one. She waited until the others were done. Then she folded her hands on the table, looked at Grant Lawson directly and said, Why should I choose a smaller firm with a limited track record at this scale over an established agency that offers the same services with less risk? The room went slightly still. Seb pressed his pen against his notepad. Grant didn't flinch. He looked at Vivian for a moment, and he said, quietly and with complete certainty, "Because established agencies will manage your brand, will fight for it." A pause. "There's a difference, and I think you know which one you actually want." The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds. Vivian held his gaze. Then she nodded, once, slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," she said. "We'll be in touch." The Holt and Crane board session began at 2 o'clock in a private conference room on the 3rd floor. There were 7 people at the table. Vivian sat at the head. The agenda was restructuring. Cost efficiency, external partnerships versus in-house consolidation. The board had prepared a recommendation package, 17 pages, very thorough, very clean, very certain. Clause 4 of the recommendation was the consolidation of marketing strategy partnerships. The language was precise, the financial case was sound. On paper, and the board was very committed to paper, it made clear, logical sense to bring these services in-house and reduce reliance on external vendors. Firms like Lawson Creative were named specifically as candidates for discontinuation. Board member Harlan Doyle, silver-haired, deep-voiced, the kind of man who had been in finance since before Vivian was born, presented the case with authority. "The numbers speak for themselves," he said. "We're paying premium rates for external strategy work that could be absorbed internally at a 30% savings over 5 years. It's not personal, it's arithmetic." 3 heads nodded. 2 were neutral. 1 was watching Vivian. "Vivian?" said the one who was watching. That was Sandra Pell, VP of Operations, old guard, sharp instincts, the kind of person who read silences the way others read spreadsheets. "You've been quiet." "I've been listening," Vivian said. And she looked at the table. And here is where the story turns on its real hinge. Not on the pitch, not on the storm, not on the hotel room or the soup or the rollaway or the 3 a.m. glass of water. On a choice. The choice that every person in power eventually has to make, whether they admit it or not. "The arithmetic is correct," Vivian said. Her voice was calm. "Harlan's analysis is sound. In a vacuum, consolidating in-house is the efficient play." "But," Sandra said. "But efficiency isn't the only variable," Vivian said, "particularly not when we're trying to break into a new market. In-house teams have institutional loyalty. They protect what already exists. External strategy firms, good ones, challenge your assumptions because they don't have a stake in the existing structure." Harlan leaned forward slightly. "Are you suggesting we table the recommendation?" "I'm suggesting we've been looking at this through the wrong lens," Vivian said. "We've been asking, how do we save money, when we should be asking, what do we need to grow?" Those are 2 different questions with 2 different answers. "Vivian, I sat through a pitch this morning," she said quietly. "From a firm this recommendation would eliminate before we gave them a real shot." She paused. "It was the best pitch I've heard in this building in 3 years. The room was still. "I am not making a business decision based on one presentation," she continued, "but I am saying that I want a full 30-day evaluation before we move forward with any consolidation. Real work, real metrics, real results." She looked at the room. "If I'm wrong, I'll tell you I was wrong, and we'll revisit." Harlan studied her. "What changed?" Vivian thought about a man stepping back from a front desk and saying, "Take the room." She thought about a 7-year-old holding a stuffed elephant in the dark. She thought about sitting at a desk at 5:30 in the morning, in the snow-muffled quiet, asking herself questions she usually refused to ask. "But my perspective," she said simply. "I got some new data." Grant was in the hotel lobby with Pippa when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. He picked up anyway. "Mr. Lawson." He recognized the voice immediately. "Ms. Holt." A pause. "Vivian," she corrected. And there was something in that one word, that small correction, that meant something, though he couldn't have immediately said what. "Vivian," he said. "The board session just concluded," she said. "I'm calling to tell you that while no final decision has been made, we would like to move forward with a 30-day pilot program. Lawson Creative would take the lead on the Midwest market campaign under our direct oversight." Grant sat very still on the lobby sofa. Pippa, who was beside him, looked up from her coloring book. If the results are what I think they will be," Vivian continued, "there's a longer-term partnership to discuss. Formal terms, real scope." He exhaled, long and slow. "Vivian." "Yes?" Was this always going to happen, or did something change? A pause. He could almost hear her thinking, choosing the precise, honest word. "Something changed," she said. He looked at Pippa. Pippa looked back at him with those green eyes, Claire's eyes, and gave him a small, entirely serious thumbs up, as if she knew somehow that whatever was happening on the other end of that phone was good. "Thank you," Grant said. "Don't thank me yet," Vivian said. "You still have to deliver." "I will." "I know." A pause. "One more thing." "Yeah?" "Tell Pippa. Herbert has excellent judgment." He almost laughed, a real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere warm and unexpected. "I'll tell him," he said. "He'll be very proud." The call ended. He sat for a moment, phone in his lap, lobby noise moving around him like water. Pippa touched his arm. "Daddy? Was it good?" He looked at her. "Yeah, baby," he said softly. "It was really good." The apartment was new, not huge, but bigger. 2 bedrooms, real ones. A bathroom that Pippa had immediately claimed as mostly mine, but Daddy can use it if he knocks. Grant stood at the kitchen counter on a Saturday morning making coffee, listening to Pippa in the living room narrating to Herbert about a cartoon involving a talking penguin, and felt, in the specific, quiet, earned way of someone who had come through something, okay, not perfect, not fixed, just okay, genuinely. His phone buzzed. He looked down. A text from a number now saved in his contacts. "Quarterly numbers are in. You should look at slide 4. He smiled despite himself. Holt and Crane. Month 6. The Midwest campaign had exceeded projections by 22%. The board had approved the full partnership. His team, all 12 of them, had been working with renewed energy that he hadn't seen in 2 years. He typed back, "Good morning to you too." 3 dots. Then, "Good morning. Look at slide 4. He laughed. He was still smiling when his phone buzzed again. "Also, Pippa's birthday is next month. She mentioned it 3 times in the last email she sent me." He stared at this message. "She emails you?" "She found my address in your phone 6 weeks ago. I've been receiving illustrated updates about Herbert's daily activities ever since." He pressed his hand to his face. "I am so sorry." "Don't be. Herbert apparently started a garden. I've been following the developments closely." He was full-on grinning now, leaning against the counter, coffee in hand, the Saturday morning light coming through the new apartment windows, his daughter's voice in the next room, a smile on his face that he hadn't planned for. "Denver next month?" he typed. "Quarterly review." 3 dots. "Denver," she typed back. "And this time, I'm getting my own room." He laughed out loud. Pippa stuck her head around the doorframe. "Daddy, what's funny?" "Nothing, Pip." "Is it Viv?" He looked at his daughter. "Maybe." Pippa nodded with enormous, satisfied certainty. "Herbert said she was going to call." "Herbert knew?" "Herbert knows everything," Pippa said, with the supreme confidence of a 7-year-old who had decided that this was simply true, and no further discussion was required. She disappeared back around the doorframe. Grant Lawson stood in his new kitchen on a Saturday morning, coffee going cold in his hand, a text on his phone, and his daughter's voice in the next room telling a stuffed elephant about the talking penguin. And he thought, about one blizzard, one hotel, one room, and a CEO who said we're mature and had no idea what she was walking into, and a single dad who said, take the room, and changed everything. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Sometimes the boldest thing you can do is the thing that looks the smallest. Grant Lawson didn't fight for the room. He didn't strategize. He didn't calculate. And he didn't measure what it would cost him or what it might return. He just stepped back. He said, take it. Not because he was weak, not because he didn't need it, because something in him knew, something that lives beneath strategy and plans and armor, that the right thing and the smart thing are sometimes the exact same move. And Vivian Holt. Vivian, who had built her entire career on control, on numbers, on the certainty that life could be managed if you were disciplined enough. Vivian spent a night in a blizzard with a man who didn't try to impress her, who just was himself, who put his daughter first, his pride second, and trusted that honesty, even uncomfortable, professionally inconvenient honesty, was worth more than any advantage she could have held over him. And that was the thing that got through, not the pitch. Not the portfolio, not the data on slide 4. The moment he stepped back from the front desk and said, take the room, that's what she saw. That's what changed things. We spend so much of our lives building walls, calling them composure, calling them professionalism, calling them being a mature adult. We walk into rooms with our armor on and wonder why nothing ever really touches us. But sometimes, life sends you a blizzard. And one room, and a 7-year-old with a stuffed elephant who doesn't know about armor. And somehow, without your permission, without your plan, something gets through anyway. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, if it reminded you of a moment when someone's simple, quiet humanity caught you completely off guard, drop it in the comments. I mean it. Tell me your version of this story. Because I promise you, you have one. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Crest Stories if you haven't already. Every story we tell here is made for you, the people who stay for the whole thing. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And share this one with someone who needs to hear it today, because maybe they're having a Tuesday like Grant's or a blizzard like Vivian's, and maybe, just maybe, all they need to know is that sometimes the boldest move is the one that looks like letting go. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next story.